Welcome back. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the last segment for this particular presentation, covering chapters 10 and chapters 9. I want to go over some of the key items from chapter 9, lifespan development. Issues in developmental psychology will be addressed, as well as prenatal development in the newborn. Then we'll look at motor, cognitive, and social development. Here are some of the issues in developmental psychology. First, we have nature and nurture. How do genes and experience guide development over our lifespan? There's been an ongoing debate that I'm sure you're familiar with about nature and nurture. Are we who we are today based on the DNA that we inherited from our mother and father? Or are we who we are today based on the experiences that we've gone through? In developmental psychology, the issue of nature and nurture still has a major questioning, major research being done to make those determinations as to how do we become the people we become. Change and stability. In what ways do we change as we age, and in what ways do we stay the same? This is a question dealing with if we have certain characteristics when we're young, do we have the same characteristics when we're much older? If you think back now to where you are at your current age and think back to when you were 10, how have you changed and how have you stayed the same? And then continuity in stages. Is development a gradual change, or are there some leaps to a new way of thinking or behaving? So the question here is this: do we go to bed one evening and then wake up the next morning having changed significantly? That would be more indicative of a stage perspective, meaning that they go from one thing to another thing and it's a drastically different thing, as opposed to continuity, where change is very slow and very gradual. So here are lots of questions that come from these three main items here to try to examine the area of developmental psychology to address in many ways as possible how we are influenced by our nature and nurture. How do we change or stay the same across time? And do these changes happen in a gradual continuous phase, or do they happen more abruptly like in stages? Now, the starting path to becoming a person or personhood is prenatal development and the newborn. It starts off with conception. Then there's lots of things that happen while you're still inside your mother that is going to be a part of prenatal experiences and prenatal development. And then once we are born, we're going to be born with a certain skill set and abilities in a sense that will allow us to be able to survive as a newly minted human being. So, there are certain dangers that can happen while we're still inside our mother. One of the dangers is called tetragens. These tetragens, quote, monster makers, are substances such as viruses and chemicals that can damage the developing embryo or fetus. Sometimes there's going to be certain cautions that people will have to say mothers or pregnant mothers should avoid these type of environmental situations or avoid these types of substances, because it is known that these substances can have an impact, a negative impact on the developing child within them. One such item is going to be alcohol. Fetal alcohol syndrome refers to cognitive, behavioral, and body-brain structure abnormalities caused by exposure to alcohol in the fetal stage. So mothers who have a problem with alcohol and then refuse to stop or abstain from drinking alcohol during their pregnancy are more likely to have a pregnancy where the child will be suffering from FAS, or fetal alcohol syndrome. Once the child is born, they're going to have certain skills available to them. They're going to be thought of, as we talked about in the previous segments, reflexes. Okay, are responses that are inborn and not to be learned, sort of instinctual to us. So these reflexes, such are are able to allow us to enhance the capability and probability of our survival as a newly minted person. The rooting reflex. When something touches a newborn's cheek, the infant turns toward that side with an open mouth. That in itself will increase the likelihood that that newborn will be able to get sufficient food to survive. The sucking reflex can be triggered by a fingertip. Fingertip put in the mouth, they will begin to suck. Same thing that will happen if a nipple is placed in their mouth as well. Again, these are inborn skills there because they help the newborn infant to survive. Crying when hungry is a very important and critical one. Is the newborn talent of using just the right sounds to motivate parents to end the noise and feed the baby. They will be different types of cries as well. Young parents, particularly young mothers, will communicate they're able to understand the various forms in which their baby cries for different various needs that they may have. Another key concept that we want to cover is maturation. In psychology, maturation refers to changes that occur primarily because of the passage of time. In developmental psychology, maturation refers to biologically driven growth and development, enabling orderly and predictable sequential changes in behavior. So it's biologically driven, based on your biology. It happens in a very orderly fashion. The sequence is predictable, and changes in behavior is usually going to result. For example, infant bodies in sequence will lift heads, then sit up, then crawl, and then walk. That is the sequence. That is how maturation occurs, and that orderly sequence of events. Experience or nurture can adjust the timing when it may occur, but maturation, nature, sets the sequence. It happens in a certain sequence. The timing may be adjusted by environmental factors, nurturing factors within that child's environment, but the sequence is going to be set. So maturation in infancy and early childhood affects the brain and motor skills. It can be thought of this way. Maturation, the biological unfolding, will be seen in brain development and motor development, happening in a sequential manner. The timing may adjust a little bit based on nurture and the environment, but maturation is sort of set that this is going to be the sequence of events that will occur. We see this really clearly in motor development. Maturation takes place in the body, in cerebellum, enabling the sequence below. Physical training generally cannot change the timing, but we have here 6 months sitting unsupported, 8 to 9 months starting to crawl, beginning to walk around 12 months, walking independently around 15 months. Let's look at Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive development. From birth to around 2 years, he proposes sensory motor, experiencing the world through senses and actions, looking, hearing, touching, mouthing, and grasping. From about 2 to around 6 to 7 years old, we have pre-operational stage, representing things with words and images using intuitive rather than logical reasoning. About 7 to 11 years of age, concrete operational, thinking logically about concrete events, grasping concrete analogies and performing arithmetic operations. And about 12 through adulthood, formal operational stage, where we can form abstract reasoning. And one of my favorites, Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. I'm going to go through this a little bit more detailed here, but I won't belabor the point too much. So, according to Erik Erikson, we develop socially. Okay, we have certain issues that challenges that we must meet, and they can come out in a very positive way or not such a positive way. Let's talk about the first one real quickly here. Infancy is his stage. The issue is developing a sense of trust or mistrust. This happens from being born to around 1 year of age. Now, the key thing here is this. The needs If needs are dependably met, infants will develop a sense of basic trust. If the baby cries and the parents show up just about every single time to take care of their needs, the baby will develop a sense of trust in the world. If the baby cries and the parents do not regularly show up or show up in a very irregular patterns, the child may develop a sense of mistrust in the world. And we can see this can develop into other things a little bit later, whether or not they have a sense of trust versus mistrust. Let me give you a quick example. Later, there's something called secure attachment. And secure attachment is seen experimentally by a mother taking a child to a very strange environment, staying there for a bit, and then the mother getting up and leaving the child. If the child is okay with that, maybe a little bit agitated, but is okay with that, they may be determined that they have secure attachment. But if they are not okay with that, if they scream or cry, that may be indicative of insecure attachment. And insecure attachment is thought to be there because of what happened in this first stage, according to Erik Erikson. So, the people who are insecure, when their mother gets up and leaves that environment, they may cry because they don't think or they don't trust the mother will be there when they need them, or that she may not return. A couple of other items I want to point out here. We have toddlerhood, where you have a child of autonomy versus shame and doubt. In this time frame, we have the terrible twos. Toddlers learn to exercise their will and do things for themselves, or they may doubt their abilities. It may be usual to hear something like this for a kid in this age. When they're trying to do something and then you try to come over to help them, they may say, "No, I can do it," simply because they're trying to struggle with the challenge of autonomy, being able to do things for themselves, versus a sense of shame and doubt. Let's move down a little bit to adolescence. In adolescence, this is going to be around the teen years into the 20s. It's a long time frame. The challenge here is identity versus role confusion. What this is meaning is this. During your adolescent years, you have to come up with who you are, to come up and establish an identity. If you don't, you may have role confusion. Let's read the description real quickly. Teenagers working at refining a sense of self by testing roles and then integrating them to form a single identity, or they become confused about who they are. Okay, so if they don't have a sense of who they are by the time they get out of adolescence, they would have achieved role confusion, which may be of a great challenge when they move into the next stage, according to Erikson, and that's young adulthood, around 20s to early 40s. Here, the challenge is intimacy versus isolation. This is the challenge. Young adults struggle to form close relationships and to gain the capacity for intimate love, or they feel socially isolated. The key thing that we see with social development here and Erik Erikson's stages is adolescence, the stage just before young adulthood, has a great deal of impact on how young adulthood will play out. For example, if you have role confusion by the time you leave adolescence, you may not know who you are, and you may establish a relationship as a young adult. And then as you're in that relationship, you may hopefully discover who you really are, what it is that you really like. And then you may be in that situation where you may have to leave the person that you've paired up with because you've discovered what you like and what you don't like, and they don't fit the bill for you. So those are some of the highlights from Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. All right, that'll be it for now.